Good morning, all who's listening. Welcome to another episode of It's Vital. This is Farah, also known as Nurse Vitals, and I'm glad you're here. So today's topic is grief and loss. Grief and loss. So yesterday I was driving to work and I was thinking about what a tough week it's been for me. I know it's probably been the same for a lot of you guys too. Here in New York City last week, we experienced a devastating fire that displaced a lot of residents from their homes and sent dozens of people to the hospital. I think it was over 60 people. And last time I checked, 17 people died in this devastating fire, including some children. And I can imagine what it was like for the firefighters who had to put this fire out. And we thank you for your service. So I was thinking about the fire, and then on top of everything that's going on with the, this pandemic, and how overwhelmed and overburdened we healthcare providers are, not to mention other essential workers. And then I was preparing myself to go to a friend's mother's funeral this week. A close friend of mine lost her mom, so I sat in my car and I thought about grief and loss, and I said, let me do a podcast on grief and loss. Only to get to work later, and I opened social media, my Facebook, and I find out that someone that I went to high school with, also died. And it just broke me, So let's talk about grief and loss. Grief is defined as the response to loss, particularly to the loss of someone or some living thing that has died, to which a bond or affection was formed. Although conventionally focused on the emotional response to loss, grief also has physical, cognitive, behavioral, social, cultural, spiritual, and philosophical dimensions. So grief is a big word. We usually grieve when we lose someone close to us, a friend, a family worker, a colleague, or a pet. Pets are family members too. So, how do we cope with grief? How do you guys cope with grief? Some people abbreviate grief in 7 stages or 5 stages. I remember when I was in school, I used to abbreviate grief with the acronym DABDA, DABDA, which at the time was 5 stages of grief, which stood for depression, anger, bargaining. No, let me go back. It was denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. So the 7 emotional stages of grief are usually understood to be initial shock or disbelief, then denial, bargaining, guilt, anger, depression, and finally acceptance or hope. Like I said, symptoms of grief can be emotional, physical, social, or even religious in nature, depending on the person. There are different ways to cope with grief. There's no single way. And when coping with when grieving the loss of someone, you don't have to go to every single stage. And there's no rule or set time period for a stage of grief. You know, some people stay in the stage of depression for a very long time. And to the point where other people, you know, get frustrated with them and they're like, oh, get over it. Get over it. You know, they're gone. Get over it. There's nothing you can do about it. And they fail to understand that, you know, not everybody handles grief, handles loss the same way as other people. Some people are more optimistic than others. Some people are better at denying things. Some people are better at hiding their emotions. So it all depends. The point is, well, there are several points, but the first point is to understand that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to grieve. As long as you're grieving in a healthy way, you're not doing things to harm yourself or thinking about harming yourself or others. You're still providing care for yourself. You're still eating and drinking and getting sleep and fresh air. You haven't shut the outside world out. You know, you still communicate with people who care for you and love you. You continue to function on a daily basis as best as you can, even on tough days. You get up, you go to school, you go to work, you do what you have to do. And if you find yourself not able to do those things, then that's when the grief becomes a concern where you have to seek some sort of help. You have to talk to someone about it. And I know losing a spouse, losing a brother, sister, best friend, or a pet, a parent, can be devastating. It's, you know, your life will never be the same without this person. However, I hate to use the cliche, but life goes on, and you have to find a way to live that life. Now, we're in our third year of this pandemic, and so many lives have been lost. You know, as a healthcare provider and hospital worker, you know, I get to see things that people who do not work in the healthcare system don't normally see, on top of what's happening and what we hear on the news. For anyone who's lost someone to COVID-19 or any other illness or traumatic event, I'm sending you this virtual hug and emotional support to let you know that you're not alone and it's going to be okay. So I wanted to close this podcast out with prayer in memory of my friend, in memory of the people who perished in the fire last week, in memory of lives lost for any reason, and in memory of people who have suffered with COVID-19 or who have lost someone, lost the battle with COVID-19. The prayer is Psalm 23, a Psalm of David, and it's called the Shepherd Psalm. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. This has been another episode of It's Vital. It's vital because it's important. Circling back to health, emotional, physical, and spiritual health, as this is a health podcast, remember, always take care of your health. Take care of your health. Thank you for listening. See you guys next time. Bye.